Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Baird Bream, and I'm with Cambridge Systematics. I'm serving as the facilitator for this meeting. We will be waiting just a minute to allow folks to join. Good evening, everyone. If you're just joining us, this is Breakout Room 6. We're just waiting a couple minutes to allow folks from the main session to join all the breakout rooms. We'll get started in just a minute. All right, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Good evening, everyone. My name is Baird Bream. I'm with Cambridge Systematics, part of the project team for the Bus Network Redesign, and I will be serving as the facilitator for this meeting. I'm joined by my colleague, Christian Higgins, who will be serving as a note taker, and Robert Guptill from the MBTA, who will be leading us through a brief presentation. The way this breakout session is going to work is, as I mentioned, we will receive a presentation going over the different changes made to bus routes that serve the following areas: Belmont, Needham, Newton, Waltham, Watertown, and Allston and Brighton. And then we'll have an opportunity for a question and answer session. I'm going to share my screen quickly to just go over some rules for how to ask questions during this breakout session. So during the session, we ask that you send direct messages to the person named Ask a Question. We will not be responding to questions provided to other co-hosts. If there is a phone-only participant in this call or in this breakout session, you can ask a question by dialing *9, which will raise your hand. We will then call on you by your phone number, but verbal comments are restricted only to those participating by phone. I will be reading the questions and sharing with the presenter during the Q&A. In order to submit these questions, please direct your chat comments to the note taker, again, renamed with Christian/ask a question. And just to reiterate, if the participant, if you contact any other person in this in this breakout session, the facilitator or the presenter, the question will not be seen or answered. People are free to move to different breakout rooms during the session, but they should leave the room and go to the main room and then select a new room. You're also free to leave, go to another breakout room, and then rejoin the meeting at 7:30 to the general Q&A. One note is that if you leave this breakout room to go to another, there's no guarantee that you will be there in time to hear the presentation, and they will not be starting the presentation over for new folks. We will go ahead and get started with the presentation. As I mentioned, Robert Guptill from the MBTA is here to walk us through.
Great, thanks, Baird. Good evening, everyone. My name is Robert Guptill. I am the Director of Service Planning at the MBTA, and I'm very pleased to be here with you tonight. I will go through a quick presentation and hopefully leave plenty of time for questions. And if anybody wants to shift to another group, they are certainly welcome to do that as well. So, in terms of the changes that were made to this map, as Doug mentioned in his presentation prior to this, we made changes to about 2/3 of the routes that were in the original proposal that came out in May. Various types of changes, including restoration of routes, changes to routings, changes to frequency, all those types of things. Much of it to respond to public feedback, to improve access, to reduce walk distances, to restore one-seat rides. But in all of that, we certainly had to keep to our budget of a 25% increase in service, and balancing the various requests and resources that we had at our disposal was certainly one of the things that we had to juggle with all of this. So in our area, there are different categories that we talked about, changes to routes. In terms of restoration, the routes 60, 64, 65, 74, and 505 were restored as part of the new proposal. In terms of routing changes, these would be routes 53, 54, 59, and 61. We added 2 new routes to the proposal, routes 56 and 58. We adjusted the span on one route, route 504. And in terms of removing routes, there was the 70 spur to Marketplace Drive that we removed. And certainly for all of these, I'm going to go into a little bit more detail in the forthcoming slides. So starting off with Route 74. This was a route that was not in the original proposal back in May 2022. Route 74 today connects Belmont Center down Concord Ave to Harvard Square, and we are proposing to restore Route 74 at what we are calling a medium frequency, which would be every 30 minutes or better, which is roughly similar to what it does today. You can see in the original proposal, there was no connection, direct connection down Concord Ave. This restores that connection. Moving to the west, bus route 54. This was a route that we had going all the way from Arlington Center to Riverside. And in the eastern section of it, between Waverly Square and Arlington, we made a change to take the route off of this street here and put it on a, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the names of the roadways here. Even I promised myself that I would remember. But we moved it to the north side of the commuter rail tracks, essentially, out of concerns that we heard from the neighborhood about bus traffic, and to get a more direct and quicker ride between Waverly Square and Belmont. And then on the south side of this route, we shortened it. Instead of terminating at Riverside, we are now proposing to terminate it at Waltham Center. And there are other routes that can now provide that connection between Waltham Center and the Green Line, which I will get to in just a second. Bus route 70, as I had mentioned, there was a proposal, the original proposal was to create high frequency service between Waltham and Kendall Square, essentially extending the 70 that exists today to Kendall Square and making it high frequency. As part of that original proposal in May, we had proposed a spur that connected Waltham Center to Marketplace Drive. We recognized that that was a relatively somewhat confusing way to structure service, and we are proposing to provide that connection between Marketplace Drive and Waltham Center with other routes that I'll shortly get to. But for Route 70, this would become a single simplified route between Waltham Center and Kendall Square at a high frequency. In the draft network, we had proposed two routes that connected between Waltham and Newton. One was Route 56, that, as you can see on the left here, went from Marketplace Drive via Waltham Center, and then connected over to Newton Corner and Watertown Yard. And Route 61 provided a similar connection between Waltham Square and Watertown, just via different roadways. In the new network, we are proposing to have two routes that provide this connection. These routes would be coordinated with one another. Each route would be a low frequency route, but with that coordination, we could get a 30-minute frequency combined when they are well coordinated. Route 56 would operate between Marketplace Drive and Waltham, and then going to Newton Corner and Watertown Square. And then Route 58 would also provide those connections, but go a little bit further down Moody Street, connect to West Newton and serve more of Washington Street. And then to the northern end, Route 61 in the original proposal, we had serving North Waltham and then continuing to Waltham Center and then connecting to Watertown. Under this proposal, we are suggesting that the Route 61 would continue to serve North Waltham, but then it would actually terminate at Marketplace Drive, and that connections to Marketplace Drive to Waltham Center could be provided by those routes in the prior slide that I showed, routes 56 and 58, that would be coordinated to provide that coordinated service between Marketplace Drive and Waltham. So that's to the north side. And then to the south side, we have Route 53 that originally was going between Riverside and Waltham. We have changed a couple things about this. The southern terminus, we are now proposing to be at Woodland instead of Riverside. That better serves the college and the hospital. And like Route 61, this route would also terminate at Marketplace Drive, again, coordinated with the routes 56 and 58, so you would have that connection between Marketplace Drive and Waltham. And indeed, in terms of coordination, this route here, Route 53, the way that we would like to structure it, and it would take a little bit of work, but we think we can do this, is that this route would be through routed with one of the routes that continues to Waltham Center. And Route 61 that I mentioned prior would also do this. So there would be a short break at Marketplace Drive, a chance for the operator to stretch their legs, use the facilities if they need to. And then that same bus would continue to Waltham Center and on to points in Newton, including Washington Street and Newton Corner and Watertown Yard. Bus route 505. We had changed this in a couple ways. One, to restore its existing routing via Auburndale, and two, to get on the highway I-90 earlier so that there's more express service. I would just note that Washington Street would be served by routes 56 and 58, as I had mentioned in the prior slide. Bus route 59, a slight modification to the routing was proposed. This was at the request of Newton to serve Adams Street as opposed to Waltham Street. Bus route 504, we added frequency during the midday to this to provide the midday frequency between Watertown Yard, Newton Corner, and downtown Boston and Copley Square. And then moving to Allston and Brighton, Route 60 had originally been proposed to be extended to Newton Center. We are, as part of this change, we have reverted to the existing Route 60 that terminates at the mall at Chestnut Hill, doing the same turnaround as it does today. Route 64, a couple changes. One was that we had originally proposed a more direct routing between Oak Square and points out to the east. We are proposing to revert Route 64 to its existing routing, going north to serve the same areas that it does today. And then the other change.
Excuse me, Robert, as a note, you've spoken for 10 minutes. Try to wrap it up in the next 5.
Yep, we have just one more slide here. And then the other change that we have is in the original proposal, we had shown a future routing that we are excited about to serve West Station. But we are showing now to do what the Route 64 does today, which is stay straight on, use Cambridge Street all the way into Cambridge. And then finally, Route 65 had originally been a high frequency proposal from Brighton all the way to Fields Corner. This was a very long route. We had heard some concerns from operators about the length of this route. And so we have split the two routes apart. Route 15 remains a high frequency route connecting Fields Corner to Ruggles. Route 65, we are proposing to keep the terminus.
Okay.
Excuse me. We are proposing to keep the terminus in Brighton where it currently terminates. And instead of the Route 65 going to Kenmore, we are proposing, as it was in the original proposal, to take it over to Ruggles to provide an Orange Line connection. So as Baird mentioned, in terms of questions, we are not taking verbal comments or questions at this time. Please provide your comments via the chat to the Ask a Question persona that exists there. And we will move now to looking at those questions. And I am seeing them coming in on my side, so I will start to answer them. So we have a question. What happened to the 553, 554 express bus Waltham through Newton to Boston? So today, well, let me go back a little bit actually. Prior to COVID happening, there were many express routes that operated between points in Waltham and downtown Boston. The 553, the 554, the 556, and the 558, along with the 501, 502, 503, and 504. Certainly as part of the pandemic, we saw commute traffic dramatically decrease. And as such, we curtailed much of this express service, such that today, only the 501 and 504, and we reinstalled the 505 to be express service. All of the 553, 554, 556, and 558, they all operate as local service, terminating in Newton Corner. Largely because we are continuing to see a real drop-off in commute traffic. We are proposing to keep that service on the 553 and 554 as local service and renaming it as the 53 and the 54 and the 56 and the 58. Having that be local service providing connections at Newton Corner or Watertown Yard or Newton Center, Newton Corner. Those provide connections to the express service to downtown, but we feel that providing those resources for local service at better frequency than we would be able to provide if we had to express all those services into downtown Boston, that is a better service design that better reflects how people are traveling today, with less commute traffic and more local trips on a daily basis. Second question, any thoughts to make the 505 run all day, even if once an hour midday? This would fill in the gap of the Fitchburg line running just once an hour, plus no non-peak direction service to the Newton train stops. Certainly when we are putting together these proposals here, these are high-level ideas, and they certainly have to fit certain typologies that we have built for these. When we actually get to start building these routes, we will certainly start to look at options for providing those, perhaps those types of services, whether it's serving particular trips or it is midday. Those are the types of things that we'll have to look at. The proposal right now, simply because of resources, doesn't propose doing that on the 505. The 505 is proposed to be strictly express service. But I do think that there is the opportunity, once we start building these routes and actually seeing how many resources it takes to do these types of things, to tweak some things here and there to try and better serve demand. Third question. Moody Street has been a pedestrian way 6 months per year for the last few years. What would the routing look like when this is happening? So as recently as just a couple weeks ago, or I think 2 weeks ago, Moody Street reverted back to two-way vehicle traffic along the entirety of Moody Street. We have made the decision at the MBTA that we cannot keep shifting back and forth between the diversion and the diversion off of Moody Street that takes us to Crescent and a regular routing between Moody Street. So we have made permanent the routing to go to Crescent Street. That is also what that routing is what we are showing for all of the routes that come up Moody Street in this new proposal. That is, nothing would operate on Moody Street between High Street and Crescent Street. Certainly we are open to discussing options to stay on Moody Street with the town of Waltham, but the one thing that we can't do, because it creates so much confusion for customers and operators, is keep switching back every 6 months on the routing. Who in Newton requested the 59 go down Adams Street instead of its current routing? There's significant opposition to this new routing. This was a request from the town of Newton, from our municipal partners that we have in Newton. We heard that this would better serve the destinations in certain neighborhoods that the representatives from Newton felt were important. So yeah, certainly, again, that is a rather revenue neutral change to make. We certainly will talk with our municipal partners as part of the rollout of this. And if feelings change because constituents reach out to their municipal leaders, I certainly encourage you to make your opinions known to your municipal representatives, and they will make their thoughts and their whatever their recommendations are clear to us, and we can work on those proposals as we move forward in terms of the implementation of this. While the increased midday frequency of the 504 is appreciated, it does not help reduce peak crowding that we are already experiencing. Please consider bringing back the 502. So in terms of express service, we continue to monitor the demand and potential crowding. I know that there is certainly an interest in resplitting the 504 and the 501 into Copley service versus downtown service like it was prior to the pandemic. We will continue to monitor the additional travel time that it takes to travel between Copley and downtown. The one benefit of doing this way, as we have changed it during the pandemic, is that we are able to provide much more service to downtown and to Copley, as opposed to if we were to split them up. Essentially, the frequency to these two destinations would be halved, and we would get into the inevitable conflict between the two destinations of Copley feeling that more resources should go to Copley and downtown feeling that more resources should go to downtown. This is a way to provide simple service that does provide better frequency to both destinations, that is express service that we've seen demand go to. Next comment, as a Waltham resident, we have a Waltham resident here, pleased to see the original design in May, but the recent design is disappointing. North Waltham used to have a one-seat ride through Watertown and Cambridge with the 70. A few years ago, that was transitioned to a two-seat ride with the 61. Now all North Waltham bus traffic will go to Marketplace Drive, forcing those users to transfer to the 53 or 58 before transferring again to the T70. This not only hurts North Waltham, but also the commuters to the businesses along 128. Anyone coming in from the 70 or commuter rail will now require a transfer to get to their job along 128. How will you ensure that North Waltham residents and 128 workers have convenient transit access? So as I had mentioned during the presentation, there would be coordination of some of these routes such that on their shared segments, you could get a combined 30-minute frequency on them, 30 minutes or better, I should say. And then we will also through route some of these routes. So the 61, for example, would be paired with, I don't remember off the top of my head right now, but one of those routes that is connecting Marketplace Drive and Marketplace Drive to Waltham Center, and then going beyond to Newton Corner and Watertown Yard. So it would be a transfer in a way of speaking, but people would stay on the same bus. There would be a short pause, 5 or so minutes at Marketplace Drive. That would allow us to get that coordination to make sure that we have it, while also providing what is in effect a one-seat ride all the way to Waltham Square and then beyond to parts of Newton Corner and Watertown Yard. What is the frequency of the 65 Brighton Center to Ruggles? The proposed frequency of that would be Needham frequency, which would be every 30 minutes or better. And that is a decrease from when it had been proposed in the original proposal to be high frequency when it was connected to the Route 15. Part of the reason for changing that, as I mentioned, was the long route and the difficulty of providing a reliable service at that frequency. Route 65 is today a moderate frequency, a medium frequency type of route. So this would not be so different from what it does today, with the one key difference being that it would terminate at Ruggles with an Orange Line connection instead of Kenmore. What is the frequency of buses from Marketplace Center in Waltham to Central Square in Waltham? I live near Hammond Street, and when I get on the 70 bus towards Cambridge, there are always a lot of people on it, some with groceries. I'm concerned that losing the 70 service to Marketplace Center will be problematic for people. So in terms of Marketplace Drive to Waltham Center, with the coordination that we are hoping to get, it would be at least every 30 minutes service would operate between those 2 points. And then there would be a transfer at Waltham Center for at least every 15 minutes from Waltham Center on the T70 all the way into Cambridge. Next question. Given the increase in frequency, what are you doing to I guess lessen the burden this is imposing on directly abutting dwellings in terms of riders that might be using their property, people that are loitering, noise from the buses, loudspeakers, and what is happening also to question what is happening to the T71 and T73. So in terms of bus service more generally, that is certainly something that we will work with our municipal partners on where bus stops are located, whether there are amenities that are there. And as part of that conversation, there are certainly concerns that can be raised from abutters about the location of bus stops. And that would be part of the normal process that we work with our municipal partners in terms of making those decisions. In terms of the T71 and T73, I didn't go over those in the presentation, but those would be unchanged from what we proposed in the May proposal, which is essentially unchanged from what we are operating today, which is high frequency service, 15 minutes or better, all day, every day on both of the 71 and the 73. Next question. Marketplace Drive is now a transit hub in Waltham, which makes no sense because no one lives there and is not convenient to get to outside of driving. Keeping 53 and 61 out of Waltham Center really harms our ability to transfer to other routes or modes of transit. I hear you now mentioning that 61, 53, 56, 58 would be through routed, but if that is the case, make it the same route on the map. It is unclear how long these trips will take. What would the through routing look like? Which routes would connect? Why is it 2 routes? Yeah, so why don't I have my bus network map here, and I think I can probably share that with you and make sure that I speak correctly about it. So for instance, Route 61, I go in the right direction here. If you're going from North Waltham and terminates at Marketplace Drive, this would be through routed with Route 58. So you could go from North Waltham all the way down to West Newton, over to Newton Corner, and then up to Watertown Yard. Again, this would be a through routed service that would provide a 1-seat ride. This route here, these 2 routes that would be through routed with each other would operate every 60 minutes or better, and with a short 5-minute or so layover at Marketplace Drive. Looking at this as being kind of a transit hub, essentially an opportunity for people to transfer in many different directions, whether they want to go to North Waltham or down to the Green Line, or to points in Newton and Waltham. It does kind of take the transfer hub out of Waltham Center while providing that transfer opportunity between Marketplace Drive and Waltham Center via the coordinated routes. But we certainly see a lot of demand for Marketplace Drive. We do see a lot of people wanting that connection to Marketplace Drive, and this way of structuring these 4 routes is a way to provide those connections in a way that hopefully is an efficient provision of service. In terms of the comment about showing them as a single route, it's a fair comment. I think, in terms of when we actually build these routes, they would be 2 separate routes because we would need the bus to stop for a couple minutes at Marketplace Drive. And in that case, when the bus gets to Marketplace Drive, the head sign, on the front of the bus, where it says which way it's going, the route name would change, the route number would change. That seems to be the way that we are leaning in terms of structuring that service. Okay, let's see. I have a request to answer the first question I asked. How are we reducing the burden of increased service on directly abutting properties? So as I said, we will work with our municipal partners and work with them to hear any concerns about bus stop locations, just the same way that we do today. Certainly when we locate bus stops, we are interested in hearing about our concerns, if there are any. So I think it's on a case-by-case basis that we address these concerns, and we'll work through that as we do with any bus service or any bus stop that exists today. Next question. Question from City Councillor Bradley MacArthur. There seem to be thoughtful updates to existing routes. In terms of new routes, what type of input pilot would have to happen to get a new route in North Waltham? So the routes that are proposed as part of this new proposal are the routes that we are proposing for Bus Network Redesign. In terms of potential new routes, we do have our supplemental transportation program. This is a funding source that the MBTA makes available to our municipal partners to provide potential additional service. We just recently released the request for proposal for this, the supplemental transportation program. We have a pot of money that we can provide to municipalities who are willing to work with us. They would be the recipients of this funding, and they would contract with a service provider how to provide that service. But that type of service would potentially provide gaps or fill in gaps that the proposed network in Bus Network Redesign does not provide. Next question. As people return to work, can you reinstate express bus service for the 553, 554, 556, and 558? Certainly, we will continue to monitor how commute traffic is progressing. We currently do not see the demand on the existing express bus routes that we have that would seem to indicate to us that we need to provide more express service. But it's something that we continually monitor, and depending on how the commute patterns change in our region, certainly we will look and see if it makes sense to provide more express service. Now, whether that express service makes sense to do it the way that we did pre-pandemic, with essentially local service on those 553, 554, 556, 558 routes that then turns to express service, versus local service that gets you to a central hub where you can get on express bus service. Those are two different service models. And that would be something that we would have to consider and think about as we see how commuting patterns are progressing. The existing 65 service does not run on Sunday. This is a huge equity issue for the folks who live in public housing and low-income housing on Washington Street in Brighton. Will the 65 run on Sunday? Yes. Route 65 will operate at 30 minutes or better frequency all days of the week, Monday through Sunday. Next question. Newton is rezoning the villages and have in the works about 1,000 new apartments along Washington Street today. We are reducing parking and pushing transit. Transferring at Newton Corner adds 30 plus minutes to the commute, with 20 people waiting 20 to 30 minutes for a bus. An express bus to downtown along Washington Street would help the residents greatly. Another comment, certainly we hear you about requesting more express service. As we had, as I'd said, we originally had the 505 providing express service down Washington Street, and then getting on the I-90 at Newton Corner. We've changed that so that the 505 gets on the highway at points west. So that does leave Washington Street with no express service along it. So as the comment correctly notes, people would have to take one of the 53 or the 58 into Newton Corner and then transfer to the 501 or 504. Certainly, we hear the demand, as evidenced tonight, for more express service, and that is something that we will have to continue monitoring. One, to see what the level of demand is for that express service, and two, to see where that demand is coming from. If it's coming from portions of Washington Street or elsewhere in Newton and Waltham, we do have that origin destination data that can help us assess questions like this in the future. What is the proposed frequency of the 501 and 504? And will these buses be coordinated with the now local 53, 54, 56, and 58? The 501 and 504 are proposed. Let's see if I can get it here. So they would be every 15 minutes operating in the peaks. We generally don't necessarily have to try and coordinate the 501 and 504 because they serve largely different demographics and ridership blocks. The 501 obviously serving Brighton and the 504 serving Watertown. That being said, if we can coordinate them, as we are saying here, if they would each be at 15 minutes, that is certainly something that we can look at doing. And in terms of providing coordinated transfers between the 53 and the 58, certainly those routes would be operating, if they are coordinated well, every 30 minutes or so. So it's certainly something that we can try our best to allow for in the morning AM transfers from the 53 and 58 to the 501 and the 504 at Newton Corner, and then in the PM do it in the reverse way. It does get tricky sometimes in terms of building schedules to provide all these connections, but it's something that we can look to do. Just to clarify, is through routing the same thing they do in Seattle? King County Metro has some of their routes, i.e. routes 7 to 49 and vice versa, do that so they don't have to turn around in the middle of downtown Seattle. So it is similar to that. This obviously isn't a through routing through the downtown area, but through routing through Marketplace Drive, which does act as a central sort of hub for service. And that is one of the reasons why you might want to consider something like through routing to provide essentially a one-seat ride where it doesn't make sense from a routing perspective to have a one very long route with all the variability that a single long route has. Next question. Will bus 60 remain as it is now, enters Chestnut Hill Towers and returns to Boston via Route 9? We have many elderly and disabled having the stop in Towers area as it is now is very important. So that is correct. Route 60 would terminate in Chestnut Hill Mall the way that it does today, and then well, in certain times of day would terminate at Chestnut Hill Mall as it does today, and then return via Route 9 via the loop. It goes west on Route 9 and then comes back east via the U-turn. But nothing would change essentially on Route 60 in terms of the western terminus. And then I had a follow-up question. So who to connect with in Cambridge in response to concern over reducing the burden of increased service frequency question. So if there's a concern with increased frequency, certainly you can reach out to your town municipal leaders in Cambridge or wherever they are. If you feel like high frequency service is not something that you would want to see, that is certainly something that we are excited to provide wherever we can is more high frequency service. But if you do not feel comfortable with this, you certainly may talk to your municipal representatives in Cambridge, for example, in their transportation department, and all that information can be found. Regarding express bus service, did you consider the impact of the I-90 realignment to traffic? Was there any thought to help reduce single occupancy vehicle traffic during the construction? So I believe this is referring to the potential I-90 realignment that we've been talking, that many municipal planner has been talking about. So that's certainly a capital project that is hopefully not too far away, but years away. If and when there is construction on I-90 and things need to happen, we certainly will do the planning for that. And certainly we are trying to reduce single occupancy vehicle traffic as part of these routing decisions, providing an appropriate level of service to meet the level of demand that is being required is certainly one of the goals, to reduce single occupancy vehicle trips. So that's something that we are hopeful that this plan overall can do. And then a question about, are the buses that go through Bank Square and go to the Green Line scheduled to run every 15 minutes? And sorry, I'm confused about what these bus numbers are. Very understandable. There are a lot of numbers. So the route that we have going to the Green Line is Route 53. So this would go to Woodland Station. Right today, we don't have any bus service to Woodland. Today we have service going to Riverside, but under this proposal, there would be no service going to Riverside, and that Green Line connection would be at Woodland Station. All right. Next question. Why is the plan? Why does the plan plan to destroy express bus service in Newton? I have ridden the 553, 554 for decades, getting on at Washington Street at Newton. All buses during rush were full pre-COVID. You said that ridership had dropped off post-COVID. Of course it has. Not having an express bus adds a half hour, if not more, to the commute. I have tried the 553, 554 in recent months. I have waited 25 to 40 minutes for a bus downtown. No one will do a commute of that length if they can drive or work from home instead. Please bring it back. We hear your comments and we will consider them. Thank you. Next comment or question. Is there any 501 or 504 service on the weekends or during the middle of the weekday? We are proposing as part of this revised proposal to have midday service on weekday on the 504. The 501 would be only during the peak periods, and there would be no weekend service on the 501 or 504. And then I have another comment. Looks like from the same person that was commenting earlier about the way to Newton Corner, making no sense with the additional homes built along Washington Street, including much affordable housing units in the next few years. So thank you for the comment, and certainly please make those comments to your town representatives in Newton, and we will continue to have a dialogue with them, and we will continue to assess, but this is the proposal as we have going forward. That's another question that came in, long shot, but there's the way to revive the 170. While there weren't many opportunities to ride it, I did find it useful when I had to head from Newton to engagement in Back Bay in the evening. We are proposing to cover much of the former 170 routing via the 61. It would come down like the 170 used to do, and it would terminate in Marketplace Drive, whereby one could either transfer to Waltham, or there would be a through routing bus that would continue on to Waltham, or you could transfer to a bus route that gets you the 53 to get you out to the Green Line. So those would be the options to provide that service. And then a question, comment, not sure anyone is going to use the 53 bus given those frequencies. I would hate to be stranded at Woodland waiting for an hour or more to get home. Certainly, we will try to make these frequencies as good as we can get them. Trying to doing all the things with coordination, notwithstanding. These are minimum frequencies, so 60 minutes or better. We've programmed in here 50 minutes, but it may be better when we actually get to building these routes, but it will be no worse than 60 minutes. All right, I believe I've reached the end of the questions that have come in that I see. Certainly, we have about, looks like only 8 more minutes, so we filled up this time pretty well. If there are any more questions, please feel free to put them in and I'll do my best to answer them. Oh, thank you for clarifying Newton is a city, not a town. My apologies. Any other comments or questions?
If you have a question, please submit your question via direct message to the account named Ask a Question Co-host.
The question came in, do we have people monitoring the increase in ridership levels for the Newton Express buses? So yes, we have what are called automatic fare collection devices. These are across the doors. They're passenger counters that count every person that gets on or off a bus. And we get that information. And when we're doing planning for a new schedule, all that information goes into our systems, alerts us to if there's any crowding. And then we would need to make a decision based off of if there's crowding. Let's see, a few more comments have come in here. Please consider the fact that Newton does not have frequent commuter rail service when considering the demand for express buses. Thank you for that comment. It is certainly something that is part of the bus network redesign. We strive to work with the commuter rail schedules as well. Certainly cannot promise anything at this juncture, but whether there's coordination between commuter rail and bus, or potentially advocating for better frequency for commuter rail, those are all options that I think we can collectively work towards. Question about why did the 52 lose weekend service after it was proposed to make the 52 an all-week service? So that is correct. Under this new proposal, the 52 is proposed to be a weekday only service. Simply resources had to be, we were limited on resources, and saving the resources on the 52 by not operating it on the weekends was a way to save resources. Overall, Newton does have an increase in service as part of bus network redesign. I don't have the exact percentage off the top of my fingers, but this was where we did cut service from back from the original proposal. We did it where we saw an overall increase in the service levels that were being provided to certain municipalities. Next question, will dedicated bus lanes be introduced in any of these service areas? So we are certainly working with our municipal partners to install bus lanes on high frequency service wherever we can. So we would love to work with Waltham to provide, to see if there are any bus priority measures that could be implemented on the T70 route. Routes T71 and T73. Those are also high frequency services that we would look to getting priority as much as possible. And then in Allston and Brighton, the T57, I hadn't mentioned it, but that is a high frequency route today. We would look to continue to try and find as many high frequency measures that we could put in place for all of these high frequency routes. Let's see. Commentary, please pass question to room 4 or 6. The 86 appears to be cut in length and frequency. This will make us more disconnected from Cambridge and lessen frequency on top of it during the weekdays. How can this be mitigated? So I can actually speak to that. So yes, the proposal here is to have the 86 stop at Harvard Square. So it would operate between Harvard Square and Reservoir. And the section that the 86 provides today between Harvard Square and Sullivan would be provided by a high frequency extension of the T109. The T109, the 109 today operates between Linden Square and Sullivan via Everett. We are proposing to make that a high frequency service and extend it all the way to Harvard to provide a 1-seat high frequency connection between Everett and points of Somerville and Cambridge, including Harvard Square. We looked at the, in terms of the existing ridership on the 86, it's about 20% of the ridership that is traveling to points beyond Harvard Square. And when you are doing that, you would need to transfer to this high frequency T109 that's every 15 minutes or better. So it is a trade-off without a doubt, but we feel that by providing that high frequency connection between Everett and points of Malden all the way to points of Somerville and Cambridge, we feel like we'll be able to get more demand, and there's definitely more ridership that we feel we'll be able to provide than what the 86 does today, while still providing a high frequency transfer for the 86. Let's see. The question is, but how will you know who would take an express bus in Newton if you offered it again? You can't tell based on current ridership. You should do a survey. Good point. And we're about to shift over, so I'll try to answer this very quickly. We have origin destination data that we can look to tell us how many people are traveling between, for instance, Newton and downtown Boston. We can look to that data to see if that might indicate to us that certain express service might be relevant to bring back. And then the last question that I have is the 57 bus service remaining the same? Yes, the 57 is remaining a high frequency service as it is today. All right, so I think we will all have to go, whether we like it or not, to the main room in just a minute. In actually 10 seconds. So thank you very much for your time here today. I hope this has been informative, and I appreciate you coming out and speaking with us, and the conversation will continue as we move forward.